So thank you. Bonjour, bienvenue tout le monde. Nous sommes encore ici. So we're back and happy 2026. It sure isn't 2015 anymore. And as the head of the IMF said recently in Davos, we're not in Kansas anymore. I'm, as leader of the Green Party, Elizabeth May, and member of Parliament for Saanich Gulf Islands, wanted to address the immediate concerns we have for this session. It was funny how my friend Steve McKinnon didn't mention the bill that worries me the most right now as we're gathered together. Although I think, une question en français, je pense qu'avec le but de la question de l'implémentation du budget, the Budget Implementation Act, unfortunately, I do carry it with me to make sure I can point out the sections that bother me, but it is over 600 pages long. It is the ultimate of omnibus budget bills. It changes 20 other laws, and it hasn't been properly studied at all. There were a number of really controversial pieces of legislation that carried at second reading through the fall, and members of the Ottawa Corps will know what it means when I say they passed on division. Il n'est pas un vote, pas un seul vote avec une registration de le vote des députés chacun. So I wasn't allowed to vote against or for Bill C-12, one of the ones that the government House leader just identified as one of their big priorities. Bill C-12 doesn't ensure safe borders, but it does ensure that refugee rights are infringed. And I'm not alone. The Association of Refugee Lawyers of Canada has said also that this violates Canada's international commitments to international refugee law. In any case, that bill went through, quote unquote, on division at second reading, which meant I couldn't register my vote against it. And when it was ultimately bundled together with other bills on the last day when Parliament met, which was December 11th, our last day was supposed to be December 12th. You'll recall we adjourned a day early based on a unanimous consent motion that rushed through a number of bills all together by unanimous consent. All I could do was say to Mr. McKinnon's office and others, I'll be voting no. This created some amount of concern because unanimous consent means what it sounds like, and one member of Parliament who doesn't agree means your unanimous consent motion isn't going to work. So in negotiating with Liberal House Leader and Deputy House Leader, they said, what's the problem? I said, my problem isn't that I don't want everybody to catch the planes they've now booked to go home a day early. My problem is that it seems wrong that I don't get to record my vote against Bill C-12 and on other bills that where I would C-4, where I would register concern and vote against them. So what happened was they amended the unanimous consent motion to end with noting the opposition of the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands. But there's been a degree, an erosion of parliamentary democracy in this place since the election that passes mostly unnoticed, because parliamentary democracy doesn't get a lot of attention even in the best of times, and this isn't the best of times. Bills are passed without proper study, notably Bill C-5, which had a programming motion that was breathtakingly anti-democratic back in June. We now have the passage also of Bill C-12, first on division, which means, for viewers, that when debate collapses, in other words, there's no more speakers to speak to it, the Speaker says, so it now passes on division. And the only members of Parliament who can object and say, we want a recorded vote on this, are members of what's called a recognized party, which in this case is, in this Parliament, Liberals, Conservatives, or the Bloc. Il y a un temps passé quand c'est le droit des députés, 5 députés des autres partis, les partis plus petits, ensemble, exigeaient un vote enregistré. So when I was first elected in 2011, I never knew I was lucky then, but there were 4 members of the Bloc Québécois, not a recognized party, and me, Green Party, not a recognized party. But the rule then was 5 members of Parliament could stand up and demand a recorded vote. We can't do that anymore. Those rules changed during COVID. So we have 7 NDP MPs and me who generally, on these votes on division, who knows how people would have voted, because on division means it's gone through. Now, you can't do on division at third reading and at report stage, but they bundled those together in the unanimous consent motion on December 11th so that the House ended quickly. On December 10th, the debate on this monster, Bill C-15, the Budget Implementation Act, passed second reading on division. Now, I hope that the Speaker and the government will agree that a bill that touches this many other pieces of legislation needs to go to more than one committee. As things now stand, since Bill C-15, the Budget Implementation Bill, passed on division on December 10th, it's now ready to second reading. It's now ready to go to the committee for study. The committee to study it is designated as the Finance Committee. But there are many sections in here that should go to other committees for proper study. And if I can point out one thing that's of concern, and I did see just this week a coalition of organizations and individuals, David Suzuki, but also Council of Canadians, and also Sierra Club, and Greenpeace, a number of organizations saying, what's this here, Division 5 of Bill C-15, is amendments to the Red Tape Reduction Act. If you're unfamiliar with them, you find that pages 3. I did have this, my question and question period, on December 9th, so I am the only member of Parliament who's raised this so far in this place to say, can the Minister of Finance explain why any minister is going to be allowed to exempt any entity from the operation of any federal law within their area as a minister? Any minister can exempt any entity from any federal law in their jurisdiction if they think it's in the public interest, and there are no criteria in the bill to tell us what would direct the minister's attention to think it's in the public interest. I won't go on about it at this point, just to say it's a priority for me, for the Green Party, and I think for Canadians across the country, to have amendments to Bill C-15, the Budget Implementation Act. I have some other concerns with other sections of this act, but certainly I want to see Division 5, the Red Tape Reduction Act, substantially amended, if not deleted, Division 5 of Bill C-15. We're looking at a lot of other bills that we still have not had properly studied in this place. Things moved fast, as I said, with decisions on division and no study, or virtually no study, in committees. I hope that as Mr. Carney gets more accommodated to his role as a parliamentarian, that Parliament will be more respected. I'm particularly concerned as well, and I'll be asking the Auditor General to look into this, a number of the newly created entities that have been created since the election, things like the Build Canada Homes and the Major Projects Office and the Office to Organize Defence Procurement, are not organized as one would expect within a relevant department reporting to a minister, but are special operating agencies under Treasury Board regulation, and thus are under Treasury Board confidentiality for things like their work plans, their budgets, their special operating agencies, which is of concern for me because of the lack of transparency that goes with being a special operating agency. I certainly will be pressing this government to see where is the climate plan. I heard there was reference to it today that it's not just that the current climate plan has been changed. There is no current climate plan. Much of what the previous government had in place has been removed. Nothing new has been added. And regardless of what we may say about the MOU with Alberta, the current government doesn't have a climate plan, and that's quite unacceptable this far into their mandate. So I think at that point, having really skimmed only the surface of the things we'll be pushing for, we'll remain vigilant on human rights. That's why I can't support Bill C-12. I was horrified that that be the one bill, one of the three bills that our government House leader friend Steve McKinnon mentioned. That one needed proper study, particularly in the ways it infringes on refugee rights. But don't forget that C-12 took portions of what was originally introduced as Bill C-2. Bill C-2, the Strong Borders Act, is still on the order paper, and now that they have forced through with the unanimous consent motion the last stages of C-12 in this place, one would expect that they're going to, because Gary Andesankri said C-2 isn't dead, it's not being withdrawn, Those were the portions of the Strong Border Act that remain once you take out what passed in C-12 for warrantless opening of mail and warrantless access to internet information. So I expect that we'll also see a new version of C-2. But for the ones that I'd also say that Steve McKinnon is very busy, and I hope that in his role as Transport Minister, he will bring back the bill that died on the order paper, Bill C-33, that was ready to go to be passed. It had gone through clause by clause in committee, that would ban the export of thermal coal from Canada and give us more protection for inland waterways. The job of a Minister of Transportation is a full-time job, and it's obviously, I have a lot of sympathy for Mr. McKinnon in his role. I also have sympathy for the Prime Minister, who wants to be dealing with a President of the United States who's petulant and sends out notices that are on his social media account to say, I'm now uninviting you. Take this letter. I think what it says, take this letter as representing that you've now lost your, I mean, I don't know. Donald Trump obviously writes his own tweets. I suppose he's imagining that he ever went to law school and he thinks this is how somebody who's smart would write a letter. It's not, but that's all right. I do accept that our Prime Minister is very smart, and I'm sure he wrote his own speech for Davos. It was well written, it was well constructed, it was rightly celebrated, but it does not represent a vision for Canada. And non, ce n'est pas une vision mondiale, pas du tout. C'est une déclaration de l'état mondial actuellement. It's a statement of how things are in the world right now. But I want Canada to step up and participate in saying, what does the new world order look like? And it's foundationally the United Nations Charter, and it's foundationally respect for human rights, and working with other democracies and not deciding that we'll jettison human rights in exchange for trade deals. I'll close there and happy to answer any questions. Maintenant, vegetarian.
What do you think the government should do for Bill C-9?
Bill C-9, I think the parts that are offensive to me, okay, so let me break it up. I don't see any problem with Bill C-9 in terms of, and I'm getting inundated, a lot of constituents, a lot of Canadians are outraged at the idea that people are no longer protected from hate speech if they're citing from sacred texts. That doesn't trouble me as much. I think that can be amended and clarified in terms of what ways in which you're protected or not protected. The part that bothers me more is the delegitimizing of lawful charter-protected rights to protest if, without your knowledge, you happen to be within blocks of a place of worship that you didn't know was there, and behind you someone's holding a flag that you didn't know was there. So I think that C-9 could use reworking, for sure, but the parts, I mean, there's sections of Leviticus, as a practicing Christian, I would never stand up and say, these are my beliefs, this section of Leviticus, which is horrific. I mean, there's lots, you can find anything you want. The Bible's big, so you can beat your swords into plowshares, or, if you feel like it, you can beat your plowshares into swords. They're both in there. So cherry picking from the Bible to defend hateful speech isn't a good idea, any more than it is from the Quran. It's important to respect religious freedoms and every Canadian's right to worship as they wish to worship. And I think that C-9 has become a flashpoint for the wrong reasons.
Do you think we're heading to a snap election in the spring?
I don't think so. Primarily because, well, the Liberals would, I thought, okay, in the back of my head as I was struggling with this bill, obviously the 2025 budget, which they didn't use disappearing ink, it still says the things they promised me that are gone in the MOU, but never mind. When I was struggling with that, I thought, in the back room somewhere, the Liberals want an election. Not necessarily Mr. Carney, not necessarily Mr. Champagne, but it would suit them to be able to say, we only got elected in April. These awful people in Parliament, and I think most Canadians would agree Parliament looks pretty awful, have kept us from fulfilling our mandate. Surely we should have been given the benefit of the doubt. In that context, that snap election in December, I think would have resulted in a Liberal majority. So I think some of them were looking for it. But they were meanwhile counting up their votes on people who would cross the floor. There may be more floor crossers still. I think that might be a preferred MO for the Liberals at this point, is to get a majority through floor crossing. We know they worked aggressively over it on specific MPs over the holidays. We'll see what happens if more join them through floor crossings, but they've got a more imminent problem, which is that they've, with Chrystia Freeland's resignation from Parliament, they're going to need a by-election. There are other Liberals rumored to be leaving soon. A set of spring by-elections, I think we can take that to the bank. But a snap election in spring, possible, but I don't think likely. There's enough reasons that the Liberals wouldn't want to take the chance. And as things now stand, they're polling so high, and Mark Carney is still wearing Teflon, so it'll take a while for that to wear down.
Vous avez voté pour le budget lors de la dernière session parlementaire. Depuis, il y a quand même des choses qui sont passées sur la scène internationale, sur la scène locale, nationale. Où en est votre confiance ou votre relation par rapport au premier ministre et votre volonté d'appuyer ou non des enjeux libéraux?
Mais maintenant, actuellement, ce n'est pas possible pour moi d'avoir confiance dans ce gouvernement. Pas du tout. Je pense qu'en passé, j'ai pensé que j'ai une relation bonne avec le Premier ministre, mais il n'est pas parlé ou expliqué pourquoi il a éliminé les promesses qui sont dans le budget. C'est clairement en anglais, le budget en anglais à page 348. Il n'est pas possible d'avoir les subventions pour l'énergie fossile dans le processus en anglais Advanced Oil Recovery, dans l'accord avec Mme Smith, il a dit absolument le contraire. Je ne sais pas. C'est pour moi un grand mystère, mais l'explication très simple, c'est que ce n'est pas possible de donner mon confiance dans le Premier ministre ni son gouvernement. Et pour moi, c'est une déclaration que je dis avec grande tristesse, parce que j'ai hâte pour un moment où il est possible de dire qu'il a ma confiance, mais pas encore. I haven't had any explanation. No one from the Prime Minister's office has said, we should talk to you about how come the things we said we would do are now vanished into thin air. We have a really good explanation, can't talk to you now, but we'll get back to you. Nothing. There's pas un seul mot d'explication ni d'excuse.
Bill C-15, the Budget Implementation Act, is currently in the committee, and if it doesn't have the amendments that you are demanding, would you support the bill in its third reading
Not a
at all?
chance. I don't support that ministers of this government get the right as individuals to exempt anyone they see fit to exempt from the operation of a federal law. And then the bill says, read it, we'll make this public as soon as it is feasible. There's no deadline on that. And we'll provide the reasons we did this, but we don't have to provide all the reasons. We don't have to say anything we think is confidential. This is not cabinet. C5 was bad enough that cabinet as a whole could decide this is a project of national significance, and therefore it can break other laws. This is an individual minister. There's not a chance in the world that if Division 5, the Red Tape Reduction Act, in C-15 reads as it does now, that I could possibly vote for it. But there's also other sections that concern me. I don't know why they're amending the International Rivers Improvement Act or the Wildlife Act, why these things need to be amended in C-15. But I mean, we'll certainly be digging into it and providing multiple amendments. But again, it's only to the Finance Committee. This touches many other areas of public policy. I also can't support Bill C-14, which is the reverse onus on bail provisions, and I certainly can't support, well, we'll see what happens with how they reintroduce Bill C-2, which was the Strong Borders Act. There's a lot that the government has put forward, and the ones that still remain to be reviewed. I could support C-16, especially as it relates to intimate partner violence, but the idea in C-14, and this passed on division, by the way, Bill C-14 that puts a reverse onus on someone requesting bail violates fundamental principles that go back hundreds of years of British common law, understanding of innocent until proven guilty. So there's a lot here to deal with. In some ways, it's been a very thin legislative agenda since the election. But the things that have been carried so far are quite appalling. I think we're going to need much more time in the committee, not that I'm against it, but by the way, if you look at C-15, at the expropriation rules around high-speed rail, Those should take a full amount of study, and they should be in the Transport Committee and not in the Finance Committee. But it's long, complicated, and requires more than the kind of non-review we've had in committees up to this point. In any case, C-15 is, the Budget Implementation Act is appalling in thinking that it's okay to put forward the notion that in order to cut red tape, an individual minister can exempt an entity from the operation of federal law.
You use Teflon to describe Prime Minister Carney. Do you really feel that way, given the fact that it's possible that it looks like he's being squeezed by both China and the U.S. at the same time? And how do you think he'll do?
Well, I think what I was talking about is domestic politics. Canadians want a leader that can stand up to Trump. We wanted elbows up. I think for a while there, it looked like Mr. Carney had lost his elbows, and he found them in Davos in a rhetorical sense. So that's good. Being squeezed by China and India doesn't have anything to do with Teflon. Within the Canadian public opinion polling, Mr. Carney is doing extremely well. Canadians are giving him their confidence, and as he climbs, Mr. Poilievre falls further behind. And it's not a two-party system, as much as the Liberals and Conservatives would like that. We need to see who does the NDP choose as their next leader. The Green Party's in good shape. I'm really pleased that we are, my colleagues in the NDP, it'll be a while before they can say this, but we're debt-free, got money in the bank. If there's an election, so be it. We have candidates nominated, especially in those ridings, like my deputy leader, Mike Morris in Kitchener Centre. A snap election would benefit us because we could get more Greens elected more quickly. But in the meantime, the Canadians don't want a snap election, and I think that will constrain. Never forget where Mr. Scheer and Scott Reid, my dear friend, were during the budget vote in hiding behind the curtains. That wasn't a bad move, because given that we can now have remote voting on our voting app, it's no longer easy to count up the votes and figure out which way things are going. So the number of MPs who weren't in the room to stand and be counted as they voted on the budget, which is why I was physically in the room to stand and be counted, I think that there'll be enough people who, with the notion of a spring election, will either in real life hide behind the curtains or in some other way make sure there's no election, because particularly the NDP and the Conservatives don't want one right now. The party that would want one would be Greens or Liberals.
Should we have heard Minister McKinnon saying that he thinks Parliament can function, but he lays all of that responsibility with Pierre Poilievre. Just what do you make of that framing coming from the government House leader?
Well, it's not a surprise. I mean, again, the Liberals and the Conservatives both would like this to be a two-party system, and the way the April election carried out and played out, the narrative and I'm not blaming the people standing in front of me, but you'll agree, the narrative in the media and the narrative in the large party advertising was, here are your choices, as if we're a presidential country where you go to the polls and you expect a ballot that says Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre. That ballot doesn't exist anywhere on the planet, or certainly nowhere within Canada. So it will be an ongoing problem to remind Canadians, look, it's critical that we keep this a multi-party parliament. It's been a multi-party parliament since the late 1800s. It always has been, and minority parliaments can serve us well. So again, anytime that a Liberal wants to reinforce it's us or Poilievre, and anytime the Conservatives want to emphasize it's us or the Liberals again, it's typical. No surprise.
Should we expect to hear more updates on Green Party's leadership race in the coming weeks? Or
Oh, yes. I'm not on the committee that's making those decisions, but I know they're meeting regularly. So there will be an announcement, and I don't know when, but I think I don't want to go out on a limb and say something that my guess would be, and I have to be honest with you, it's a guess, is that the leadership race will be in and done within calendar 2026, and I'll be very happy at an in-person convention to stand there and say, I'm now passing the torch to either a team of co-leaders or a new sole leader, and with having used the leadership race to expand and build the party more. So I'm looking forward to it, but I don't know the dates because they haven't been selected yet. Yeah. Est-ce qu'il y a les autres questions? No? Merci, and please have a look at pages 301 to 304 of the 600-page plus Bill C-15 and see if you don't think it's quite a shocking approach to governance to say any individual minister can exempt any entity from a law in their jurisdiction if they think it's in the public interest by themselves, one minister. Shocking. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.